And that last piece might sound a little confusing, but currently all the workflow, so if you set up your standard workflow for a pre-award office, for example, it's done in XML. So it's not something that most institutions would be comfortable doing themselves, unless they have, obviously, if they have a Java developer or somebody understands XML, you could certainly do it. It is not rocket science, but it's not for an end user. The workflow and business rule user interface would be. It would allow anybody who had, some decent sense about how to use a computer to go in and say, okay, I want to take this step, and I want it to branch here or here. You're actually going to be able to set that up visually, so it'll be much easier for you to use. And then in April, they're going to be releasing what they call their convergence model, which is they will have caught up with all the functionality that's in Coeus, and in fact, I think they'll be a little bit ahead because they don't believe Coeus has an iCook module right now. So you'll have your animal study stuff in there. You'll have BERT integration. BERT is the Business Intelligence Reporting tool. It's a decent tool for reporting. It does require somebody to be trained in how to use the application. And then there will also be ARA reporting. Okay, so this is all great. Tell me a little bit about the application. First, most important thing to understand is it's a web application. I know that sounds like it's kind of redundant these days, but there's a lot of people who are still developing thick or thin client applications. This is not. This is a web application. It gets installed on an application server somewhere on your campus, or it could be hosted, and your users log in with a web application. That's it. I mean, it's that simple. They can log in with Firefox. They can log in with Internet Explorer. They can log in with Safari from a Macintosh. They can log in from any contemporary web browser. So it's that simple. There's no need to install database connections or drivers or update your configurations or update the 20 or 100, depending on the size of your institution, client machines every time you make a small change or a patch or something's broken. And that can be a pretty daunting task. I mean, the larger you are, the more costly it is. Some of these people have automated jobs that run out, but I can tell you that's all well and fine. Let's say you've got 150 machines out there that have Coeus installed on them. You update all 150 machines automatically overnight, super fantastic. But then what happens is things like people get on their desktop a little pop-up that'll say, hey, your Java JDK is out of date. Do you want to upgrade it now? And they say yes, and all of a sudden the application stops working. I'm sure you guys run into that sometimes with like PDF upgrades for Adobe. People go to the latest version of Adobe and oops, sorry, it doesn't work with grants.gov. And they didn't know that. So that stuff costs a lot of time and effort to keep everybody up and running. And this really eliminates all of that. It's a document-based system, and that's kind of a mouthful if you don't understand the technology behind it. What it means is that rather than an application that's written with your standard kind of tables and views, it's based around the notion that every piece of data that goes into the application is really a document. And where that makes sense when we're talking about a proposal or a protocol document, it doesn't really make as much sense when we're talking about a code related to cost sharing. But a cost sharing code is actually its own little document. So if you say, this what kind of cost sharing this is, you have to kind of give it a description, say who put it in and when they put it in, and that document in and of itself becomes a field in a drop-down list. And what that gives you is tremendous auditability, and it's an interesting approach to an application development situation, and I think it's actually working fairly well for them. By the way, I should mention I'm from New York, so I talk fast. I also promise to try and keep this as short as possible. So let's talk about Rice a little bit. So Rice is their enterprise class middleware. So it's the thing that provides all of the structure necessary for developing an application. I'll start out by saying that Kuali is a Thai word for wok. So, and rice is the thing that you make most of your meals out of. So that's kind of their thought process for where these names came from. Again, I have no relationship with how these were come up with, but that's the thought process. So just to see this going forward, if you see any other funky names coming up that may be related to that whole process. So the big 5 pieces that are in this are KNS, which is the Kuali nervous system. That's the process that kind of watches what's going on. Kuali enterprise notification, that's the piece that communicates between all these. The Kuali service bus, which is the piece that allows all of them to talk to one another. And then you got Kuali enterprise workflow, so that's your workflow that we were talking about earlier. and Kuali Identity Management, which is the thing that does your authorization in your application. Authentication can be done, by the way, in any application outside of this. So if you have LDAP or CAS or whatever you may be using for your single sign-on at your institution, it can be swapped out of KC easily. But the actual, who has access to what document within the process, that's done within Kuali Identity Management. Okay, so I already kind of mentioned this. The documents that we were talking about before, they can include business data and processes. There are special documents, as we mentioned earlier. When I say they're special, what it means is that they just have more details related to them. They're not any different than a simple document, but they do in their basis, in their core, but they have more metadata related to them, more other fields. All documents can be subject to workflow rules, so you could have put a workflow rule on, obviously, a proposal or a protocol or a budget, but you can also put a workflow rule on adding that cost sharing field that I was talking about earlier, that somebody can't just add it unless they're administrator, that you can allow individual users to add one and then it has to go through a workflow before it gets added into the process. So it makes it pretty powerful. So documents, obviously, they have business rules, security, they're all tied together by these things called namespaces, and that's another kind of a geeky internet term, but in the background there's a namespace for your individual modules, and that's what holds these things together. This is a real quick, pretty picture that kind of shows that Kuali service bus in the middle. It shows your different pieces in it, so your KNS, your KSB connectors, and how they're all talking to each other, and just more graphical than anything. They took the time to put the picture together, so I figured I'd share it with you. All right, so there are two different types of documents. So maintenance documents are like the code that I was talking about earlier. Very fast to build using their data dictionary they have. They have very limited functionality, and they're typically used to maintain reference data and simple business processes. So they're not really complicated. And then we got the transactional documents we talked about again. So your proposal, for example. More work to build them, obviously. So if you wanted to build your own type of document, basically what I'm trying to say is if you're using Rice, you could create your own transactional document. So if you said, hey, nobody's working on hazmat, and we've got a couple developers, maybe we can send them to some training on Rice, and they could learn how to write a hazmat document for us. Obviously, they're more complex, and they have more business processes involved in them. Okay, so now we know what KC is. We kind of have an idea of what it does in terms of how it's built. And I did talk a little bit about the different kinds of functionality it has. So if you were interested in implementing KC, what do you need? I mean, this is really the bottom line, right? That all sounds great, Chris. It's a free piece of software. So let's talk about it, right? So you would need to have hardware, a server somewhere or server space somewhere, or a host for the application itself. So what does that mean? It means you need to have a place to install an application server. Now, Tomcat's the one that's listed here, and I'm listing the ones here because they're free. So your application server could be Tomcat, which is free. You can get the application, which is KC, which is free. You can use a database such as Oracle or MySQL, which is free. But often, larger institutions already have an Oracle instance, so it's just a matter of getting an instance for another database. So that also can be free to a certain extent in that there's no additional cost to your university to add that. You need somebody familiar with the different components that we're talking about. So by components, I mean, all the things from Tomcat, from, the database, all the things that go into the infrastructure that you need for this. So you need somebody who is familiar with that. And you need someone familiar with implementing an ERA solution or another enterprise-like system. So if you've got somebody who's been through, for example, a PeopleSoft or an Oracle implementation, I consider an ERA implementation probably about 25, 30% of the effort of what one of those was. It's a complex process. It's not as simple as just flip a switch and off you go. So if you have somebody who's been through this before, you could have somebody like that available to you. So what do you do next? If you're interested in doing something like this, first of all, there's a test drive available on the Kuali Foundation's website, and the link is here. It's pretty easy to go out and find it. You can just go to www.kuali.org, and you'll see right on their main page there's a link to test drives for both their KFS and their KC products. And with some very simple instructions, which are you just need to know that the user ID is quick start when it asks you to log in. you can be logged in and messing around with Casey, right after you get off of this call. It's really that simple. Now, if you're looking to do something, obviously, like KC, and obviously you have to build a case for ERA at your institution if you haven't already done that, or if you're not in the process of doing that. Do the usual process, put together some kind of group, see if you can put together a group or committee to sit and investigate what's out there, what's available. Say take stock of your ERA needs. That's a nice way of saying gather requirements. What do you really need? Not what do you want, not what would be wonderful, but what do you need to do your work? Because if somebody's going to ask you to make a business case for why you're doing this, and they're not going to want to hear about bells and whistles. They're going to want to understand what's it really going to drive in terms of productivity. Can we take some heads out? Whatever that impetus is at your institution. I've often told people, I had a conversation with a PUI the other day, where they have literally like 1.5 people in the office, and I said to the woman, you could get far more productivity out of implementing an ERA solution than you could by hiring another staff member, and the cost for a small institution is probably the same. And you'll continue to get that. You'll probably get 5 times as much productivity out of having that application as you would, and you certainly can't afford to hire 3 or 4 more people right now. It wasn't a hard case to make because she understood how much work is going on out in the field and how much work those 4 people who are doing her working on it, and they just can't keep up. And having an application really does make it easier for you to share that load with some of the people that are out in the field who are doing the work. Some department folks, some faculty, other people other than just in your office. And obviously, you want to evaluate the available solutions. We love KC. We think it's great. We think it's got a very bright future. We think it's going to be the system to select. As time goes on, people are going to say to themselves, well, why would I pay a couple $100,000 for this application when I can get this other application for free? It just doesn't make any sense to us. And it is a strong application developed by some really smart folks. And obviously, we've been involved in it for about 1.5 years now. So we've been doing a great amount of work to try and build up people's awareness of it and get more people involved. And we've been doing some things related to it as well. So what's our role? What do we do? This is kind of like a little bit of a salesy section. So we provide hosting. We provide installations. We can do modifications of the code for your particular institution. We've developed application modules, add-ons, so they're kind of like plugins for it. These are commercial modules. So Quest Funding Search Tool, which allows you to search for funding opportunities and populate them right into a proposal, taking out that chance of messing up, fumble fingering some important detail that will cause you a problem down the line. Also just speeds the process overall. Insight reporting tool that also has business analytics in it. A banner interface for those that are using Banner. And we're working on an effort reporting module right now to make your lives simpler, because obviously that's one of those wonderful things that you guys all have to do. We do implementations, obviously, so we do all the work related to getting you guys up and running, understanding what your process is, doing business process mapping, gap analysis, the training that's involved, the base configuration, the importing of your data, all that fun stuff. And obviously we do training, both technical and functional. So we can train your staff on how to run the application server, how to do all the work related to the infrastructure. And we can also do the functional training saying this is, based on what we've learned about your process and what we've agreed to, this is how you're going to use KC at your institution. This is how it will be used there, which is very different than how it's going to be used somewhere else. And that training is based on that. And then obviously we can provide ongoing support as well. So down the road, after you've gotten up and running, somebody's going to need somebody to call if they have a problem. We provide that kind of support. All right, so obviously wrapping up here, we're doing other webinars on pre-award, post-award IRB, building that case for ERA, one about implementing ERA, whether it's our solution, KC or some other solution. By the way, those two are not related specifically to KC. They're just in general, how do you build a case for ERA? How do you implement ERA? And then a demonstration on leveraging technology just in general. So for your pre-award office or post-award office, if you want it, how do you use technology to communicate with people? And obviously we provide personal demonstrations for folks if they want to learn more about this in detail for their specific needs. We're happy to set up a webinar to sit with you and your staff and talk about what's going on. My contact information is right here on the presentation. I am going to try and post this presentation, make it available so you can go back and look at it. But again, we're Moderis, so www.moderis.org. You can always send an email to sales@moderis.org. There's always somebody watching that one. My email is cthompson, cthompson, @moderis.org. Our main number is 518-412-6600. Give us a call anytime. And now I'm going to open up the floor for questions.